very much, Steve. And I want to, as others have, acknowledged that we're on the traditional territories of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh properties. And I'm a little bit nervous being up here. I have to tell, where's Charlotte, my friend Charlotte? So my disclaimer is I'm European, I'm a mother-in-law, and I remember the shampoo commercial. So I was sitting there when you were talking, and I thought, oh no. But that's not why I was asked to talk. But you sort of have to get that out because it's in the back of my mind that, oh no, you're all going to realize that I may be of the person here that actually you're talking about. On a serious note, though, I am very honored actually to be here. And I look to my friend Joe Gallagher about some of the ups and downs we've had going through the safety and humility work together. Humbling doesn't begin to describe it, though that was not the intent in the beginning, and I will tell you a little bit of our story. But actually, I am here representing the Ministry of Health, and to actually give you a sense of why is this important to us, why is this important to government, and more importantly, why, as individuals working in the ministry, this is important work. So Joe mentioned this morning about the long journey and work that others certainly have done around getting us to the place we're at in British Columbia. And so again, I feel a little bit like an imposter because I was not part of most of this work. I've been at the ministry for 3 years, and before that worked at Island Health with my friend Steve, who actually, I have to tell you all, has turned into a bit of a bossy britches. He was not like that when I worked with him. He was a little bit more even going, and when he was sort of hurrying up the dancing, I thought, jeepers, he's at the ministry now, I wonder if that's had an impact. I don't think so. Having said that, difficult slide to read, but all to say, this has taken years and years and years of work of people that have gone before most of us to actually get to the spot we are today, which is actually working together in a real, meaningful way. And I'll tell you a little bit about how I see the quality safety story and this particular work. I think Joe mentioned also today is going to be another one of those firsts in British Columbia where our regulators are coming together to sign a similar commitment to which the health authority CEOs and the ministry signed. I think we need to, and I loved what you said about celebrating, I think we need to celebrate these moments because when I talk to my colleagues across the country, it's not politically correct, they're gobsmacked by actually the work that's going on here. And I think, Charlotte, you mentioned the cutting work the First Nations Health Authority is doing and has done. I think sometimes we take it for granted, and I guess I'm here to say to you, we should never take that for granted. I spend a fair amount of time talking to my provincial counterparts, and they are continually wondering in awe how we got here. So this timeline shows you how we got here and what we did. A lot of these people say, well, you signed documents, what do they mean? And I guess what I want to say today about the commitment to cultural safety and humility is what a signed document can actually do. So why is this important? I think Charlotte started off a little bit negative, Nancy, talking about the health inequities. It's the truth. So why should we be concerned about this? We shouldn't be proud about the fact that we have 230,000 British Columbians that don't share the same health status as some of us. So if there was never a compelling case to actually move forward, that's it. That's not okay. And I would say to you, the Ministry of Health completely understands that, and I could go through all the data about neonatal prematurity, neonatal deaths. I think everyone in this room knows that we have an issue around this. The disproportionate burden, and I hate that burden of healthcare. It's not a burden, it's actually we have not done the things that we need to do to actually lift everyone up. I think, though, the last two bullets are the purpose of this discussion and why we're all here today. And this notion is access to safe care, whatever that means. And so my story about safety and quality is I had the opportunity very early on my tenure at the Ministry of Health to go to Joe's board meeting. And he and I were standing at the elevator after the meeting, and we were talking about cultural competency. And we were talking about the wonderful educational program we have in British Columbia. And a couple of you may know me, and you know how impatient I am. I know my family would be up here going, yeah. I said to Joe, that's great. Teaching people is really important, but what are we doing? You're like, what are we doing? One of the things Joe always challenges us with is how do you hardwire any of this work into the fabric of the organization? And we began to talk about where do we talk about cultural competency in a way that actually resonates with our care providers and resonates with ourselves in government or our leadership. And it is a safety issue, and I guess I cannot say that often enough. Those of us that have worked in quality and safety for years absolutely know if you can't talk to each other, if you're afraid of bringing things up, if you're not listened to, you have a fundamental quality and safety issue. And that was the beginning of some of this work, and then I really, hats off to the Quality Council in BC for taking this up and doing something with it. Because having something over on the side, as opposed to something that's integrated and embedded, is not going to get us where we want to go. So it was a wonderful discussion at the elevator bay. The elevators went up and down. And I need to mention that Joe never mentioned the word humility at that point. So we began to do this work together. We asked the Canadian Foundation for Healthcare Improvement to help us work through this. And that's when Joe you all know Joe, very smooth, actually, brought in the word humility. And I remember having that discussion with him at Leadership Council, and it was more like, yeah, that's not going to work. You know, no. Safety we all get. This whole idea of being humble, not so much. And that's the honest truth. The best thing about that, though, is I would say that word humility has opened up more conversations and more discussions than the word safety. So one more time, Joe, you were right. I humbly say that to you. But at the time, it was really, we had more than a few watershed moments. We thought, we're going to get this far. We are not going to get there because none of us like to see a declaration that we're all going to be humble people. Likely, I would say, of the really clever, smart things that Joe has helped us see is that notion of humility. And I would say what's happened is it's humility, and I hate to use this vernacular, on both sides. We do need to understand each other better if we're going to advance any of this agenda. And there's the declaration. It was very white, as you can see. Didn't turn out very well. So why is this important? So people talk about documents, you don't use them, you don't do anything with them. I think there are some seminal documents, though, that we actually do things with. We took a long time, longer than I would have liked, did I mention that impatient thing, to actually come up with this declaration. We went back and forth. I would say every word was micro, and it wasn't tinkered with. It was actually, do we actually understand this, and do we believe it, and do we mean it? And the mean it is, okay, then you need to move to some action. So again, not wanting to repeat what I said before, the fact we've got our regulator signing today is another huge one of those steps forward. So this was signed in 2015 by the CEOs and the Deputy Minister, and it was, isn't that great? We got a document. Now what are we going to do? So one of the things, some of you will be surprised, the Ministry of Health likes to tell people what to do. I mean, we're very good at that. I know that's, we don't often, though, look internally at ourselves and say, what's our commitment? Don't forget, we're a signatory to this. So I think, don't you love that notion of mandate letters? We actually send mandate letters to the health authorities and mandate certain activities. And around this in particular, we are looking for clear, specific, explicit actions that are moving the quality, safety, and humility work forward. So it has to be more than, yes, we're talking to each other and we like each other. So then we started to look internally, and like many of the health authorities, we have a small but mighty little group in our Aboriginal Health. It used to be Secretariat. And the great thing about that is we actually had people helping us move this work forward. The not so good thing about that is that gave everybody else a free ride. It's almost like that get out of jail pass, because the rest of the ministry was saying, good for, yay, look at the good work they're doing, without looking at yourselves and saying, so what am I doing in my division? What am I doing in my area? How have I actually done some work that actually would advance our Aboriginal recruitment and retention? And so we have done quite a stand on our own heads looking at things, because back to Joe, if you're going to embed this in the fabric of the organization, it has to be embedded. You actually have to be able to see some concrete, tangible evidence that all of the divisions in the Ministry of Health are actually working towards this. So we now have our Aboriginal group helping us, but they're kind of the sage on the side as opposed to, we'll do it for you. We no longer look at our ADM, Arlene Patton, every time someone says Indigenous, and we look at her and say, why haven't you fixed that? We are now looking at ourselves. We've actually seconded my friend Steve from Island Health, thank you very much, Island Health, to help us, particularly around our workforce. So if you fundamentally believe that the workforce should mirror the population, we've got a long way to go in the Ministry of Health. And the humility piece, back to Joe's teaching us, and we actually don't know how you go about that. There are some real risks to folks to self-declare. There are some real risks to folks to actually be seen to be in a category. I think, Charlotte, to your point, that's different. So how you do that is pretty tricky, particularly when you really don't know where to begin. And I know that the work that Steve has done in Island Health will help us move that forward. So significant look at all of our systems and processes. We actually have plans too, and the expectation around the senior leadership is those plans, again, will be specific and explicit around this, whether it's around recruitment and retention or whether it's around how we're actually approaching some of the work. Just to give you some ideas that, so we're not starting from zero. I think I mentioned the work that Island Health has done. They've done some fabulous work, particularly around the employment, and again with the belief that the workforce should match up to the population that you have, and have done some very good work about this self-identification and trying to actually then embed practices that are supportive of folks in the workplace, that actually they can see themselves not only there, but they can see that they actually have the support that they need to be successful. I think the other piece I wanted to, on these bullets, is looking at what Northern Health has done around the complaints process. Because I think what Charlotte indicated and South Central indicated is if you don't actually know what's happening and you don't actually hear some of the concerns people have, you're kind of trying to actually make things better in a way that you don't understand. So they have spent a great deal of time looking at their concerns or complaints or whatever process with actually their elders to make sure that actually it looks and sounds like something that people would feel they were able to approach. The hospital design, thank you, your comments, South Central. I think we've got some very good examples now in this province around any of our new builds, is where are we embedding the cultural piece that actually, again, mirrors our population. So we have some examples in Northern Health. Certainly the North Island hospitals, I know, have had an enormous amount of influence around the folks up there. And it's become one of those expectations now. And this is where government does have an opportunity to influence. So we have a fair amount of capital building going on in the province, and there is an expectation, an explicit expectation, that the look and feel actually aligns to the population that you're serving. And that is a completely different approach than we would have had 10 years ago. You might have had the odd sort of piece of artwork. This is actually, no, you need to be working with your communities to actually see what would be meaningful. We talked a bit about this. This has been work that hats off to Joe, that he's been tireless about in terms of the regulators, because going back to if cultural safety is a fundamental right of people, then the regulators who regulate our professionals need to have that embedded in how it is they're looking at the professional competencies, the professional expectations, and I think the next step, I guess, Joe, is the schools. You know, the post-secondary schools that actually are preparing people. Where is that in the curriculum? And I think, I know Shannon is here, I think was there an hour over 5 years or something? I mean, there you are, yeah. So I think that's perhaps the next step around how do we embed this, because if we don't help people as they're beginning their professional careers, it's pretty hard to do unlearning and relearning. It's not impossible, but boy, wouldn't it be better if we were actually getting people when they first came in and set this as an expectation. The other piece that comes up from time to time, and I'm not sure whether you have had this experience as well, it's not all about Aboriginals and Indigenous people. No, but if you think about the basic fundamentals of what we're talking about here, in terms of caring, kindness, compassion, openness, non-judgmental, I, for one, certainly can say that actually benefits all people. This is about all people. have a particular focus at this particular time. It's no different when people talk about doing seniors care in a different way. Most of those fundamental principles apply to all people. So if we want and believe that we should be patient-centered or person-centered or to your, customer-centered, we actually need to actually embed this in the fabric of our thinking and how we actually go about our work. The humility at work, it's a two-way street. I would say, Joe, one of the things that I've noticed in the last 3 years at Leadership Council, we are now having those deeper discussions. We don't sort of sit on the sidelines with each other anymore, and what is it, almost political correctness to the point of paralysis, that we're all afraid. We're not afraid now to say things. I mean, we could be a bit more politically correct at times, but it is actually trying to understand. There are many sides to any issue, but how is it that we're respecting the different sides? And I was thinking about the mental health forum that we had about 3 or 4 months ago. And again, we have fundamentally changed some of our look and feel around that to embed much more the whole wellness piece in it and what that means to other people. So there is a real opportunity for all of us to learn, and it is a two-way street. We are never, certainly in government, going to be successful without stepping back and being humble to actually understanding new ways. So I can't tell you how thrilled I am that we're actually talking about this in the venue of quality and safety, because for me personally, that's where this fits. This is the fit. It is actually about quality and safety, and it is about being patient-centered in a way I don't think we can even imagine what the next 5 or 10 years are. So thank you very much for the opportunity to say something.